Hi, I'm Greg Rosenbaum, the head of South by Southwest EDU. I'm so excited to have you join us for another installment of South by Southwest EDU online. I hope you enjoyed the live screening of the film Unschooled. And for those that missed it, it's a powerful documentary showcasing a radical new approach to education in Philadelphia. Today, we're excited to have an all-star lineup follow the film in a live conversation and Q&A with the community. Now I'd like to turn it over to NPR education correspondent Anya Kamenetz to kick off the session and introduce the panel.
Hi, good afternoon. It's really exciting for me to be hosting this. This is fulfilling an unbroken streak for me at presenting at almost every South by Southwest EDU, I believe, for almost the last decade. So I'm happy to be able to be joining you remotely from Brooklyn. I'm going to introduce our awesome panelists. I think I'm going to start with the learner. If you don't mind, Miles Conyers, can you wave hello? Say hello.
Hi. Hello.
All right. And we've got Krystal Dillard, the co-director of Natural Creativity, the Unschooling Center featured in the film.
Hi.
We've got Ulcca Joshi Hansen, who's the Chief Strategic Engagement Officer at Boundless, and she's going to describe to us a little bit about what they do, helping other educators make this kind of stuff happen. Say hello, Ulcca. You are muted, yes.
Hi, I am so sorry. There was hail, so I was trying to be muted. Hello, everyone. Good to be here.
Great. We have Jerika Johnstone, who's a parent from Natural Creativity. Can you say hello? Thanks for joining us. Hi, glad you made it.
Thank you.
And of course, we have our storytellers, Rachel Beth Anderson and Tim Grucha, the co-directors of Unschooled. Sorry that I slaughtered your name, Tim. Please.
No, you were absolutely perfect. I've never heard it pronounced so well from my own mother. It's
flattery will get you everywhere. Okay. So, this is a really powerful movie. I heard from a friend of mine that I'd recommended it to over Twitter just now, and she said, this is not at all what I expected when I heard unschooling or unschooled. So maybe I will take it to you two about, what led you to this story? And then within that, when you focus on natural creativity, why did you focus on these three students, on Jaya, Amani, and Miles?
So I think the interesting thing is, I think we're similar to a lot of people when they first hear about unschooling, like, how does this work? We were kind of skeptics as well. We're like, we needed to see it in action. And so when we met Peter and heard his plan to bring his philosophy to Philadelphia, we thought that would be the perfect way to actually see this from the very beginning. And then meeting, Miles and Jaya and Amani and their families and hearing their stories about how all they wanted was a chance for a decent education and that they had struggled for so many years and not had that opportunity. We wanted to follow them and hope that maybe this would be a solution since they hadn't been able to find one at the time. But.
Yeah, and we were particularly interested in following teens because even if you're not familiar with the concept of unschooling, but you have a basic idea of what the concept is and how far out it might sound, you might imagine that it could work well with younger people, elementary age students who are not so indoctrinated, who are still fresh. And it was very interesting to see if this philosophy might work for teens, someone who'd spent, say a decade inside the public school system.
Great, thank you so much. And Krystal Dillard, I really want to hear from you kind of what you think about this model and what it means for education right now. We're in such an unprecedented moment when it comes to the way that children are learning around the world. So I'm just curious for your reflections on what this model has to say for this moment.
Well, first of all, I have to start off by giving a little bit of my own background where, like, I was a conventional is a better term, a conventional educator as a teacher for over 10 years and also a teacher coach where I worked with teachers in public schools. I had this background where, I was in public schooling, as well as private education and progressive education at some point. So coming to the work at Natural Creativity, what I found really exciting was it was this opportunity where young people were really able to have ownership over their own learning. And it was really centered around them having the time to follow their own interest. And so in this moment of COVID-19 and people being home, I really think that why this film is important or why this work is important is because this is an opportunity for young people to be home and actually be using their time as they wish, as opposed to having their time be directed by all of the adults in their lives. And I think there's a real opportunity for that now.
So seeing this moment as an opportunity, I think, is maybe a little bit different from how we're hearing about it. And so I wonder what you can tell me about unschooling as a philosophy that would really enable parents if they say you have a 3-year-old and a 3rd grader downstairs, like I do, and they're, trying to figure out, how do I keep them engaged, and it's not going to be Zoom all day. So what is that? How do you apply this philosophy? How do you get started?
A huge part of it. And it can be challenging when when young people are already sort of indoctrinated with schooling and this idea of someone's going to tell me how my day is supposed to go. So when that's released, I think what you see in the film is that deschooling process that actually takes some people time, including me as an adult. I would say I'm deschooling as someone who's been in a very schooled environment with lots of structure, and now to be given that time, I think it's totally natural that you will see young people at the beginning of that not know what they want to do at that time, or sleep or rest, or find one thing they really like that's relaxing or soothing to them. And I think you saw some of that in the film. So I think, first of all of that is natural, and that could be happening right now for young people. And at this moment, I think it's also an opportunity, like you said, like, what can you do right now? It's really talking to your young person about what is it that you wish to be doing with your time, or what's something that you want to be doing or know more about, and then giving them the opportunity really just to do that. And as the adult, the role could be giving them the tools that they need, whether that's technology or whether it's the supplies needed for them to go off and do the thing they're interested in.
I want to ask you a little bit about resources, because when you see the model in the school, you see the care and attention, the personal attention that's being given to each student, the listening. This is not letting people go by themselves, off by themselves, and just figure it out. So how do you talk about the need to provide that to 55 million school children in the United States?
That is such a great question. Part of what I really love about the work that's happening at Natural Creativity is that it's not only smaller, because it's really not about the size, it's about that ratio between the amount of adults who are there and the amount of young people and families. And the fact that we have a ratio that's something like 7-1, and that we strive to keep a ratio like that, means that we have the opportunity to build those personal connections. And then in terms of resources, I think the film really shows how, depending on a family's background, depending on the young person, what is needed for them can be wildly different from one to the next. So at Natural Creativity, we have the time and the space to really dedicate to finding those resources. And we take that very seriously in terms of, it is our jobs to be finding what are the things in our community that we can connect our families to that help meet their needs. So I can only speak to us as the smaller, and my wish would be that there would be Natural Creativities or smaller communities everywhere that would be able to be that place that families could make those connections and get those resources.
It's fascinating and bizarre, because we're getting healthcare guidance right now that we should be grouping students in a dozen or fewer. Right. And that's not anything anyone would have wished, but here we are. And so does this open up the opportunity to ask that question of how could this model actually scale?
Yeah, I think, first of all, coming from someone who, again, was in conventional education, I think if you ask any teacher right now, what is one change that you would make in order for you to have a greater impact in your classroom, 9 out of 10 would say smaller class sizes. So I think this idea of having less young people to adults in terms of ratio is not necessarily a new one. And I think that it is a moment and an opportunity where there's a lot of opportunity for people to see what can we be doing differently. And in some ways, I've shared, and certainly Jerika as a parent at Natural Creativity can say, in some ways, our parents were better prepared. I mean, this is a hard time for everyone, and I'm certainly not trying to paint some rose-colored picture where we had the answer. No, I mean, none of us were expecting this. But families who have been unschooling and homeschooling in these ways where they've been home with their young people, in some ways were better prepared for a time like this. And so were their young people, because their young people know how to find things that interest them and do them. And their families know how to support that.
There was a question that I feel like I didn't phrase as well as I could have in our pre-conversation, but it's really, I think, about when you see children being given so much choice over what they learn and the way that they encounter things, is that in any way at odds with the vision of education that says we want to expose children to as wide a range of things as possible, whether you talk about that as academic rigor or some kind of canon, or whether it's about, diverse viewpoints? How do you make sure that that happens within this kind of framework?
Yeah, and that's great. And that's really helpful the way that you phrased it there. I mean, I have to be honest with you. One of the things that I've had to sort of come to terms with as someone who, again, was in a conventional education is that no matter how much information is sort of being thrown at a young person, that doesn't necessarily represent what they're going to learn or what they're going to take. And so, again, at a place like Natural Creativity, where we already know, even in conventional schooling, that interest is important and deep, and that it's interest and its relationship and all these things that we're seeing at NC that help young people connect to the things that they're learning about and go deeper and actually internalize that education within themselves. So those are things that we actually know already about the way the learning process works. And so when you think about a place like NC where young people are, I would use the term liberated. I don't think it's too bold to say liberated and freed to explore those interests. We have a lot of trust in them that through that opening, they are going to have the opportunity to learn many, many different things. And I think part of it too comes from the knowledge that learning is not this isolated thing that I think schooling has convinced us that it is. Like, your math is over here and your reading is over here and your history is here. Learning is actually this process that's much more holistic. And so if you think about a young person who, for example, is interested in cooking, cooking is connected to history, is connected to reading, is connected to math. So there are many, many different skills and information that's connected to any topic that a young person could be interested in. And it's really the role of the facilitator to be part of pointing out, in some ways, what those connections are. So I would say that for us, there really is no fear that they're not going to get enough information about the world. They're learning every single day, and it's about honoring what that learning process is. And that's true for all young people who are anywhere, not just at Natural Creativity.
Makes a lot of sense. So Miles, I want to bring you in here to get your perspective, your gut check on this. They're describing the model, but you lived it. And first of all, I mean, what did it mean to you to be given the choice to pursue exactly what you wanted to learn about? How did that come into focus for you?
I mean, it was a lot of like trust. I had to trust the idea that I can like free roam and just like go into my interests and just like trust that that was the deal and that I wasn't like gonna have anyone take that over and how I wasn't gonna do it on my own behalf. So definitely having that trust, because I didn't have a lot of trust in school with certain people, because it was always like, it was quote unquote us, um they were always putting something like, a project for us, but it wasn't really us taking over, it was mostly them taking over. So definitely having that free roam to like explore your interest and your passions and work into that and have people that you trust that help you and explore that with you.
One of the exchanges with you in the film that really struck me was when your teacher, your facilitator, was telling you to literally value your work more highly, right? Like price wise.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I mean, I guess, is that, and tell us a little bit about, because I know you're kind of pursuing this artistic, creative type of career in a way now, right?
Yeah, I think more, yeah, back then I didn't really I was just getting into like the creative world, so I didn't understand much of it. I was just like learning stuff, and definitely now I know more stuff. So definitely having him say, higher your prices, definitely means a lot, and I take that in a lot to what I do. Just with like putting in work, like higher, what you're doing, take opportunities, and that's what I'm doing now.
I mean, it has a business meaning, but it also has like a philosophical meaning too, right?
Yeah, definitely does.
And can you just tell us a little bit about what you're up to now?
Right now I'm working with a lot of Philly artists, rappers. I'm in a kind of Philly artist community type of thing. And we're all working together on certain things through Instagram. I am doing editing right now, and I'm also trying to do a little bit of photography, but also modeling on behalf of it. But just like getting artists together, I like getting artists together, especially young artists in Philly, and putting things out and supporting. So I've been mostly just like supporting and editing a little bit. I was editing this morning and talking to two artists about some ideas.
Very awesome. I'm getting some questions from the Slido about your buying your work. Do you have a handle that you want to promote?
I don't have anything right now too much in the works. I mean, I have an Instagram. People can follow me on Instagram.
There we go.
Soku78, SOKU78. So you guys can follow me on there, see what I'm doing.
There you go. Awesome.
Actually,
So,
I have a podcast coming up soon.
you do? You have a podcast? Uh-oh, you're getting into my business now.
Yeah.
So, Anya.
I don't know what's going on.
Cool. What's it called?
We haven't had a name for it yet. We're just putting ideas for things to talk about for like just like kind of freelance and getting comfortable with it, but I'm sure we'll come up with a name.
Awesome. Good luck. So Ulcca, we got a quote here from Felicia, who's an educational consultant, who says, it's easy to be self-directed when you've seen lots of options in your world, but it's harder to be self-directed when you haven't seen those options. So yeah, let us know your perspective on this. And I also would love to know just a little bit more background on your connection to this work.
Sure. So I'll start with that. So I'm a teacher by training, and I started and taught in Newark, New Jersey, also in a very conventional school. And that totally did not fit my model of who young people are and what they do. And so pretty much for the last 20 years, my study has been on kind of human-centered, learner-centered models from like Montessori and Steiner all the way up. And so a lot of my research and work has been in schools around the country and around the world that do this. And so getting to see what I think this film kind of brings to life so beautifully, which is the complexity and the nuance of this work. It's kind of the slow education, like the slow food movement, right? But it's this kind of unfolding of human beings in these communities. So, and I'm now with Boundless, which is really a nonprofit. We work around the country and the world to help people really reach this transformed way of doing education. So not just tinkering with the old model, but to really think about how do we shift our mindsets around the purpose of education, who young people are, what they're capable of, and what education could be as a result. I think Felicia, I'm not sure that it's so much about having seen options or not, right? I think we see young people who come from some of the wealthiest, most privileged backgrounds who are totally unable to be self-directed, right? And I think we see young people who come from really challenging backgrounds who are some of the most amazing self-directed people that we've seen. So, but I think, so each human being, I think, is born self-directed. If you take a 2 or 3 or 4-year-old, you don't have to force them to learn. This is what we do. So I think, Krystal, this idea that it's been schooled out of us, right, the way you phrased it is exactly right. And the students we meet in this film, right? Miles, you were 14, and the others were 13. So we were seeing them at this moment where you've had years of education, where you've been told you're not capable, you're not the ones who drive your own learning. And so I think that was what we were seeing in the film. But I think, and seeing the sort of progression on that. But I think there are two issues that I'll just point out for the sake of this conversation, right? The first is, what are the outcomes that we want for young people in terms of knowledge and skills and dispositions? And what's the role of that formal education in providing it, right? And can we assume that every student is just going to get what they need with no support or no guidance? And I think it's a false dichotomy that you have to do one or the other, right? At Natural Creativity, you see that direct instruction is there if needed. You got it, Miles, from your mentor, right? Who was like, this is how you do this. So there's no reason that you can't have this type of education and still be providing young people with what they need to learn the basics of reading and math and history and even the canon. I do think we're going to have honest conversations about, is it realistic? I think I read somewhere that knowledge doubles every 13 hours or something ridiculous like that, right? No child is ever going to know everything. And so there is a really interesting question about what is the baseline of knowledge that we need in order to be able to keep learning. And I think for elementary, that might look different than it does for middle school than it does for high school. And then the second question that I think is more subtle, and I think we're going to keep talking about this, is we have this idea, and it's partly because progressive education has been available more in some communities in this country than other communities, that our poor, our Black and brown kids need the structure of conventional education, and that somehow once you have that, then you can go on, right, and have this kind of agentic learning. And I think that's not true to the history. Many of the most progressive models, like Montessori, started with some of the young people who were from the most challenging backgrounds and circumstances, because what was understood is that the sort of you need somebody who sees you, who knows you, who tells you that they trust you and that you can trust yourself, right? It's Maslow's hierarchy. And that starting with that, which is what I think we see Peter and sort of the other adults in this film doing over time, is the foundation for Miles and all of your peers, right? Being able to take off. And I think this relates, just to kind of close out, to this question about resources, right? I think there's a worldview that birthed the conventional system, and there's a worldview that birthed these kind of unschooled progressive movements. And I think there's sometimes a scarcity mindset that operates in the conventional system. But I think inside of these progressive movements, one of the resources is young people. Once young people are owning their learning, right, they are the biggest resource. And it's not that you will need kind of one adult with 7 students. Some of the high schools where you go, where you see students really doing this work, it could be one adult or multiple adults with 20, 25 people, but the students own their work. And I think we also have to see communities as part of the resource, right? The adults in the community that you bring in at Natural Creativity, they are also part of the resource. So I think we just start to think about these things differently. And I would hate for this conversation to be derailed because people go, well, we can't afford a 1-to-7 ratio in the public system, right? Especially at this moment where resources are going to be scarce.
Jerika, I want to come to, oh, sorry, please go ahead, Krystal.
I'm so sorry. I just wanted to comment on that, Ulcca. That was so great. And I wanted to comment also just that families are part of those, families themselves are part of those resources. And part of the work is supporting families in empowering them to see where they too are a resource for their young people.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue then. Jerika, I wanted to come to you as a parent and as someone who really took a leap of faith, right, in trying something different with your children, different from what you yourself were exposed to. There's so many parents right now who have been thrust into this role suddenly of reconsidering everything about how their children learn. What advice do you have for them?
I think Miles hit it on the head. He spoke a lot about trust. Trust is huge every day. We as a world have to be in a real state of trust with this global pandemic. And the same goes for when it comes to working with your learners and your youth, trusting them enough that they're going to get the essentials because they've have such a passion for cooking or such a passion for animals that they're going to, be exposed to the ABCs of the 1, 2, 3s and go about it in a joyful way that isn't an imposition, but really something that they're driven to discover because it's coming from their passion. So I think there is a pause that we are experiencing now, and it gives us as parents the opportunity to sit back and observe and just see what happens if we trust and breathe. And like Ulcca said, we're born curious. So you're going to see that your children are learning and definitely thriving as they explore their personal interests. So
you have such a calming vibe. I can tell that you're a mother of multiple children because I'm getting it from like just hearing you. So I have a lightning round question before we go to the audience questions, and anybody who can choose to weigh in a few words. We're in the middle of this global crisis. It is a pause. It's causing us to reconsider everything, how we get our energy, prisons, immigration, healthcare, travel, live events. Everything's on the table. Given your background and all of your passion and interest in the transformation of education, what's the one change you would want to see going forward in the way that our children learn? Yes. Krystal.
I'd want to see parents and families more connected to their young people, knowing them more, talking to them more, and knowing, as Jerika mentioned, observing them more to get to know who they are as people.
Beautiful.
And I would add that with our schools as well. I would like schools to start with the assumption that young people are really capable and curious, and start with, who are you? Ask them, what do you do when no one's telling you what to do? And listen, deeply listen, and then start using, I think with COVID, we're going to have more limited periods of time in person, but use the in-person time to build those relationships, help ask those questions, and scaffold kids to be able to use the time that they have out of school, and families to kind of do the independent work and learning that we know that they can.
Yes, valuing the individual and mindfulness. Are you able to go within when you're feeling stressed or when you can't see your friends? Are you able to find the peace and the joy from within and not looking without? So really schools to pay attention to mindfulness and just being.
Okay.
And I think I would add something as well in this time where there is so much homeschooling happening right now, and the rumor that it may continue in the fall. Who knows how long this could go for? I would just say I embraced this myself with my own daughter who's 10, and I was terrified. I didn't know what I was going to do, and I've got my job. I'm full-time working, and I'm trying to make it all work. So is my wife, and I remember the night before we were going to start this process, I hadn't prepared anything because I was pretty stumped. It seemed like an enormous task that I couldn't grasp. And the next morning I woke up, my daughter was already sitting at the table and she'd written out a curriculum for the month. It's something she wanted to do. It made sense to her. Now, maybe I'm lucky, but I think that there's something about having trust that your young person can do this. Don't think that, oh no, this is really, really difficult. It is difficult. It takes time. You have to be there. You have to be next to your child, or somebody should be. When they have a question, you've got to be able to answer that. But trust that the child can grasp this concept probably better than you can as an adult.
I love it. Miles, any last words?
I totally agree with everybody. It's especially during this time, like most of my friends who go to traditional schools, they're being homeschooled right now too. And it's definitely like weird to have everybody kind of like in their houses, and and definitely it's a difficult time for a lot of my friends too, because they have a lot of passions and careers they want to pursue. but definitely I've seen a lot of and talking to a lot of kids my age about this, this whole thing, and talking to them even about me being unschooled, and how, that kind of freedom is like educational wise is it's a lot. It's a lot. And it's a struggle. A lot of them don't understand it because they're just like, like, oh, you just like kind of, do whatever. And it's not even that, it's um creating your own curriculum is it's hard because it's like you get so used to people just putting things together for you. So definitely you need to, for parents wise and adults wise, you need to have trust in kids. um and that's hard. That's definitely hard because you don't know, what kids are up to these type of times. um but you definitely need to have a lot of trust, because we're, I'm 17. I feel like I'm too old to be a kid, but I'm too young to be an adult. So I'm just living my life, and getting through these struggles.
Excellent. Okay. We're going to go over to the Slido. There's still time to ask questions, but I'm going to go from the most voted down. And I guess, Krystal, this one's for you, do you have updates on the other students featured in the film?
Yes. So the one I know the most about is Amani, who is still at Natural Creativity. She continues to be there. And during this time of COVID-19 and being home, she's been working on a children's book, illustrating it and writing the words with a facilitator.
Nice.
So she continues to thrive and pursue her interests, and is looking forward to, staying with us as she moves towards also getting a high school diploma. So she does have interest in a high school diploma, and we're working with her on supporting her in that, which means learning what's needed to learn to pass that test, because that's how it goes, and that's what she wants. So we're here to help her with that. Jaya, on the other hand, is no longer at Natural Creativity, and so I was not here when she was there, so I don't have as much information about her. She's 18, by the way, so she is also 18.
There's also a request for an update on Peter's children. Rachel Beth, can you all speak to that?
Peter's children?
Yeah.
Well, two of his children actually run, one runs Open Connections, and another child is also a facilitator. He has his son runs a tech company, and he has another daughter who has, I think, a PhD. So they're all thriving and doing very well for themselves.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you. There's an interesting question here about, are there trauma-informed unschooling programs? What's the intersection between trauma-informed teaching and unschooling? Ulcca, do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, so what I would say is, if we think about trauma-informed is actually sort of a name that we give to kind of sets of practices, often which are about relationship, about helping young people be able to name their emotions and experiences, to really give them the skills intentionally to be able to navigate and handle those. And so in the conventional system, we talk about trauma-informed practices because we're sort of bolting them onto a system that wasn't designed to do it. I would say with unschooling and a lot of these progressive approaches, it's simply woven into the fabric because it is so deeply grounded in relationship and helping young people know themselves, and intentionally giving them the capacity to sort of manage and navigate that. So I think it's more that it's woven through the experience than that it's something related to or sort of somehow tied in it separately on.
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely, Ulcca. I think it's looking at trauma-informed in that way, as, again, that terminology is often used in a conventional system where those things are not already happening, whereas that's really embedded in the work that we're already doing. I would also add, because this is just sort of connected to what I feel was in that question, this idea of deschooling, and that there is a process that young people go through when they're coming from having experienced trauma in some ways from the schooling they've had, along with whatever else they maybe have experienced. When they're coming into an environment like natural creativity or into unschooling in general, there's a time of just sort of coming off of all of that. And that's a lot of what you see in the film. And that is, if we're thinking of trauma informed as something that is separate than what we're doing, we are being informed by giving them the space to rest, to deschool and let go, and waiting for, you know, the opportunities for us to come in and work with them.
Mhm.
And I think I thought the film did such a beautiful job. So really kudos to Rachel and to Tim. Like, I think you captured that so beautifully, like what it took for each of the learners to kind of deschool, de-traumatize, and sort of come into a semblance of relationship and trust, because that word keeps coming up. Right, Miles?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. This is a question I'm curious about, which is, are you operating natural creativity right now? Does it work online? How does this translate?
Yeah. When you say, is it operating now, is that like during COVID-19 or in general?
I'm not sure, but my question is it operating? Yeah, during COVID-19 was my question.
Okay. So during COVID-19, like many communities, we are mostly online. So we are meeting with our young people online. But again, the difference between sort of conventional schooling and what we're doing is it's not compulsory, meaning we're not saying you have to be showing up on Zoom at this time with us every single day, but we have plenty of offerings and lots of young people take us up on those offerings. And we also have a model where young people have a partner, which is one facilitator that is sort of their person that they, they create goals with them and they support them in growing and developing on their goals. And that person also works with the family. So during this time, that partnership model really works out, where facilitators are calling their partners and chatting with them about what they're doing and really supporting the learning and the growing that's happening at home, and also supporting the families who also need their own support during this time.
Excellent. Excellent. There's a couple different questions pertaining to your operations. One is about how can you donate, and the other one is about your cost of operation. I don't know how specific you want to get, but what's the sustainability here?
Yeah. So that was a great question. And I actually saw over the chat, I was so interested in the chat that was going on during the film. I hope that that's recorded somewhere. I would love to respond to each person who had so many interesting things to say and lots of questions. So Natural Creativity does operate as a nonprofit. So the question that I saw earlier was, are we a charter school, and what are the reasons that we don't do that? So we are a nonprofit, which means a lot of our operational costs come through grants, come through donors. So if people are interested in supporting that, which I think is an incredible thing, I think places like Natural Creativity really need the support of grants and donors. And if people are wanting to be a part of this work that needs people to support it, they certainly can get in touch with us. So we're at naturalcreativitycenter.org. And so if people are interested in donating to us, they can go to our website and you will find plenty of information about us, including how to support us.
Anya, you're muted. Oops.
Sorry about that. Tim and Rachel, there's a question about basically, can I rent this movie? Can I buy this movie? What are your release plans going forward? That's my question as well.
So I think that's still in the works, but if you go to unschooledthemovement.com and you sign up, then you can get updates on future screenings and when this will finally be available to watch at home as well.
Excellent, excellent. So there's a couple questions about accountability. Do we hold public schools to a different standard than a nonprofit like this? Basically, this question is, why did an educational consultant judge the Natural Creativity Center as a failure? Weren't these students in the public system for so many years first, and didn't that system fail them just as much? I don't know. Do you have thoughts about that, Krystal?
Okay, I can see you have things you want to say.
Yeah, I think we both have the same reaction. Go for it. I'll jump in.
I mean, the starting point to that is that I think that even though we have seen things about conventional schooling that haven't been successful over and over and over again, it's sort of the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. And I think for many people, they would rather go to a system that they feel comfortable with and that they know something about and that they know works sometimes, because I think we all also have a few stories in our mind about people who conventional schooling really worked for. And so we believe, that this is sort of a thing that can work for people. I think and in that, I think we forget that there also are plenty of people who have not been served by some of those systems, and that places like natural creativity create an opportunity for another way, and that there are people who need another way.
And I would just add to that, well, a couple of things. I do think there's a need for schools like Natural Creativity to not have to be in the independent, private, and nonprofit sector. The closest that we get in the public sector, interestingly enough, is often our alternative high schools and programs that serve at promise youth, right? And what's very interesting is that even inside the public system, we have figured out a way to have alternative accountability systems or kind of different ways, because we understand, but we understand that they're up to something different. But what we do is we require young people to go through 7, 8, 9 years of kind of essentially kind of torture for them inside the system before we'll let them go to a high school model. And so I think it's actually really important in the public system and public discourse as we think about meaningful choice for families, that it's not about governance models. It should not be about charters versus public, district public. It's actually about what's the approach that a school takes to its work, and how do we ensure that families have meaningful access to kind of pre-K through 12 pipelines of schools that match the needs of their learners, right? And so I think we do have to think about our accountability system in general. What do standardized tests measure? Do they measure them well? Are we really, fairly comparing schools? We sort of are seeing, I think in COVID, there's a lot more exposure of the ways in which there are these chinks that we've not yet really talked about. So, but I think it's, I think the critical thing for me is just how are we going to talk about the outcomes we really want? And how are we going to measure the outcomes that really matter in ways that hold all public schools accountable for producing those for all young learners?
Thank you, Ulcca. I think that's really just like it's what we would like. I mean, I think that's what we would prefer to see. I think what's so important about places like Natural Creativity is we do need to show the success of it. And that's what we're here to do the work and to show that these alternatives are necessary, valuable, and effective.
Miles, there's a bunch of questions for you. I'm going to stack them so you get a chance to respond how you want to. The first one is, what is it like for you watching the film? I'm sure it's hard. I know it's hard for me to watch myself on film, especially never mind like years ago. Secondly, what skills did you learn as a learner at Natural Creativity? And finally, how do you think your life would be different if you had been unschooled since kindergarten?
It's definitely like looking at it when we went to New York at the screening to watch it was definitely a weird experience, because looking at myself from that long ago was just such like a different me, and I was just so like kind of new to the world, and I didn't really know how to talk to people that much, and especially education was just like I was having a hard time with education, and then watching it, even it was just like I can see I was during that time was going through a lot of struggles. Yeah, it was definitely good though. It's good to watch it, and I had a good time watching it, and it's an important film, I think, for a lot of other kids and other adults to watch this film and to understand that school isn't certain type of schooling isn't for everybody. Um, it's definitely something I was glad to be a part of now, and I'm not kind of ashamed of looking at it.
Awesome. So there's a question about what do we do if we want to have a program like this in our area? I don't know who wants to weigh in on that first. Maybe Ulcca.
So I would say first, explore and see whether there is. I mean, I think there are a lot of, and it may not be unschooling, but I think you can find a lot of independent, private, homeschool learning co-ops, right, that are these progressive models that have a lot of the elements of the unschooling kind of piece. I think, other alternatives, if you want to do it inside of the public system, there are ways to kind of think about charters or to think about micro schools where you can do this type of work, and parent co-ops. My Tech High is a really interesting nonprofit that is in different states that really allows parents and families to work together to kind of do this hybrid model where you're able to get a lot of the content that you'll need for credits in the public system, but then still have some time. And then homeschooling, right? That is an option for every single family under the law. So that is something to look at. And it's obviously harder, right? Each of the things I just said have costs and benefits and things that prevent many families from accessing them and executing them. But those are some of the things that you could start with.
That's great. Yes, if you're wanting to connect to natural creativity, which is one way, if you're interested and you want to know more about us and what we're doing, you can find us at our website, which I am correcting myself because I made a little mistake in saying it earlier. It's naturalcreativity.org, so no center in there. And also you can follow us on Facebook at Natural Creativity Center, and you can follow us on Instagram at Natural Creativity Center. So that's how you can get in touch with us. Broader than that, I absolutely agree with Ulcca in the sense that there are many, many places who are doing this work. So it is important to look in your community and see what's out there. One place you can go is this film actually has a wonderful website, unschooledthemovement.com, that has lots and lots of resources on there about unschooling, and will give you books that you can read, podcasts to listen to, many, many different resources for how you can learn more about what we do.
And let me just add one other thing. And there'll be educators and principals that won't like me saying this, but at the end of the day, you are your child's parent, and you have the right to advocate for the things that your child is going to need to thrive. So I know for my kids, like through 4th grade, I was like, they're not doing homework. You can give it to them, but they're not doing homework because they need time to play and just kind of be at home. And over the years, I think building relationships with educators to kind of say, look, this is kind of our philosophy. This is what we think. Is it possible to have some free stuff where he can do a project or really explore things that he wants? And I know my parents did that for me when I was growing up. And so I think even inside of the system, there are ways to advocate for your child and giving them some of the opportunities to really grow and be curious and explore their passions.
I love it, Ulcca. Yes, absolutely to that. And to that point, shout out to Miles's mom and to Jerika and to all the families who are doing this work, because that is their way of empowering themselves and their young people. They really are their advocates.
There's a number of different questions about how the public school system can interface with unschooling, or how teachers can disrupt from inside their classroom if they want to stay in the system that they're in. And since you all have experience in the traditional schooling system, most of us do, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a real challenge. I'm going to be honest. Part of why I'm at Natural Creativity is I felt, in a sense, that I needed to liberate myself from that. So, it is tough. I do think that there are wonderful teachers and administrators who are out there finding ways to do all sorts of different kind of work in the environment that they're in, and more power to them. It is not easy with some of the bureaucracy that's involved, but there are people who are able to do that work. For me as an educator, the more I found community with other educators, nonprofits that were outside, groups, books, podcasts, all kinds of information, and definitely centered around community, the more empowered I felt to continue to grow my mind and my pedagogy beyond, what I was given in my teacher preparation program.
Mm-hmm. But it is always a tension, right? Whether just try to disrupt from within or leave and form your own thing. It's a classic.
So I have just two thoughts. One, I think there are big and small things you can do. I think knowing your kids and building relationships with them is kind of the first step to any of this, because I think the more you know them, the more you know their families, the more able you are to kind of engage students in sort of helping shape and guide their own learning in ways that, frankly, you can do even behind the doors of your classroom. If you walk into any school and you ask, like, who's the best teacher here? That teacher is almost always the person who's kind of doing that inside of the school. So that's one. I do also think, though, that this is the moment to start engaging our communities, whether it's the school community initially or the broader community, about just in conversations about what do we want education to be for our kids. Because at a certain point, this is partly a political with a small p process of really kind of ensuring that there's demand from families and communities and businesses and civic organizations to say we need change, and then to be able to work with kind of our systems and structures to create the kind of space and flexibility that would allow the system to start to change. So if COVID does nothing else, I hope that it inspires people through movies like this and others to really do a screening and start having a conversation and see what emerges.
Yeah. Also, to just add on to that, that's so clear. I want to add on to that, that you can also join communities that are already out here and centers that are out here and support them if you're someone who's interested in this work.
Excellent, excellent. It's you guys are living your philosophy there, giving people the resources to pursue it on their own. There's a number of really good questions here. I guess I want to direct this one to Rachel and to Tim, which is, why did you choose to end the film in the way that you did?
I think, it was important to show that, every young person that comes through this, it really, as you were saying earlier, some people thrive straight away. Some people need to be deschooled. Some of the young people, there was expectations that of what people wanted from them. And I think it was important to show that you're not going to have the same outcome for everybody. And that even though Miles left NC, seeing him now, you can see he has this clear idea, or many ideas of things that he wants to go after now and collaborate. And I think that's something that maybe might not have come if he wouldn't have, without the time at NC.
Yeah, I think that that is one thing that I love, having these screenings and discussion panels, because I do love to update about, in particular, Miles. So, there's a certain entertainment part of making a film. But one thing I think that's really left out is it's very difficult to measure, when in the Unschooled philosophy, a sort of academic rating or success. It's easy in the school system. What did you get a score out of 10? Okay, that's what it is. But how do you sort of scale or rate your young person's well-being, happiness, and confidence? And I think that's one of the hardest things to sort of grasp about the whole philosophy when you don't know so much about it. And one thing that I did find with all of our characters was that no matter where they were academically at the end of that first year, their confidence levels, and Miles, you can tell me I'm wrong, but I felt had really shot up. And I felt that gave them the opportunity to feel more in control of themselves, their lives, and their decisions. And from what I've seen from Miles, I mean, he's really, I think Miles mentioned this himself earlier, that he looks back at himself as a different person. And I would agree. What I see in Miles now is somebody very different. And it's hard to imagine that it's just a question of time passing, that without the time that he had at Unschooled, with someone trusting him and allowing him to therefore build his confidence, I just think that it must have had some influence. And I think that's one of the biggest value points of this philosophy, is the confidence that can be instilled in the young people that don't have the doubt. Am I getting this right? Am I getting this wrong? What if that's not the point? What if the point is, let's see how it goes and let's learn from that?
Miles, do you agree with that?
I totally agree, because back then, when we were even filming, I had my confidence was very I don't know, it was everywhere. I was very scared of the world, and scared about like having the freedom to like learn things on my own, and kind of have that. And definitely now, like I've gone through so many struggles and so many upcomings, and my confidence now for certain things and who I am is definitely it's definitely like it's there. I'm more comfortable about who I am and what I do in my life, and you know, and that's what it is. And I let people know, you know, this is, I'm a kid, and I'm living my own life, you know. That's just me, you know. I do, you know, I do normal things, you know.
Normal thing. All right, everybody. This has been amazing. It's been wonderful to hear and to connect with each of you. I'm gonna thank you all. I don't know if we applaud on Zoom. It sounds weird when people do it, but
That's fingers. I'm with it.
yeah.
Thumbs up, thumbs up.